Okay, so we are beginning to learn about the physiology of the muscles and how they actually work to contract. So this first set of notes will deal mostly with skeletal muscle, and then we'll move on to cardiac and smooth muscle. Okay, so three basic types: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Skeletal muscle is obviously on your bones, helps you move. Cardiac is in your heart, and smooth is going to be inside organs. But they're very different. They differ in their structure, and where they are, how they function, and also how they're activated. So skeletal and smooth muscles are elongated, and they have what are called muscle fibers. So their individual muscle cells are really long, like fibers. And muscle contraction depends on the activation of two myofilaments that we call actin and myosin. So some other terminology that you'll come across quite frequently that you'll want to know the difference between. A sarcolemma is the muscle plasma membrane. So if you remember, in a normal cell, the plasma membrane is the membrane that's around the outside of a normal cell. Well, a muscle cell has that as well. It just looks different. Sarcoplasm is the cytoplasm of a muscle cell, and prefixes like myo, mice, and sarco all refer to muscle. Okay, so the functional characteristics of muscles, we call this 3 E's and a C. Excitability is one, so that's the ability to receive and respond to stimuli. Contractility is the C there, the ability to shorten forcibly, so contract. Extensibility is the ability to be stretched or extended. And elasticity is the ability to be able to recoil and resume the original resting length. If your muscle didn't do one or more of these, you would have something wrong with your muscle. Okay, so skeletal muscles are responsible for our movement. Cardiac muscles are only found in the heart, nowhere else, and help blood course through your body. Smooth muscle helps maintain blood pressure. It squeezes and propels substances like food or feces through organs. And muscles also are important to help us maintain our posture, to stabilize joints, and to generate heat. Skeletal muscle, what makes it so obvious is the striations, and you can see in this picture how it kind of looks like it's striped, like these pink and white stripes. Those are the striations. And it is voluntarily controlled, which means you can control it. You can decide to move your hand, to move your leg, or to move your arm. Whereas your heart and your stomach, they're doing that automatically. You're not controlling that. Skeletal muscle will contract rapidly but tires easily, but is extremely adaptable and can exert huge amounts of force. So skeletal muscle is made up of layers. On the very outside, you'll see in that picture there, that thin layer of epimysium around the outside, and that's an overcoat of connective tissue that surrounds the entire muscle and kind of helps give it protection. And then you can see there how it connects to the tendon, which then hooks to your bone. Inside, you've got the endomysium, which is a fine sheath of connective tissue around each muscle fiber. And then the perimysium is the fibrous connective tissue that surrounds groups of muscle fibers. So take it piece by piece. Okay, so we have an individual muscle cell. You have a bundle of muscles. So this little bundle right here is several muscle fibers, all kind of like strands of spaghetti, all gathered together. And what is around them is the endomysium. So the endomysium is around each individual cell, and then around that is going to be the perimysium, and then around the very outside here is the epimysium. So it's kind of in bundles and layers. So you take one cell, you bundle a whole bunch together, then you bundle a whole bunch of bundles together, and it creates very strong muscles. Myofibrils are densely packed rod-like contractile elements. So we're taking a muscle cell and we're breaking it down here. So each has perfectly aligned repeating series of dark A bands and light I bands. And you can see here the different stripes. You see dark stripes and light stripes. Okay, and we'll zoom in here. So again, this is talking about an individual muscle cell here. You've got dark bands, you've got light bands, you've got a nucleus, just like a normal cell does. You've got mitochondria, just like a normal cell does, which is really important in a skeletal muscle, because if you remember, mitochondria help provide the ATP, so the energy. And then the sarcolemma, remember, is like our plasma membrane. And then you've got these individual myofibrils that are all kind of bundles together. So muscles are all about these bundles. Okay, so the individual myofilaments have these dark and light bands. So you've got thin filaments, which do not overlap, and thick filaments in the H zone. So we've got, so here's the H zone right here. And then we've got dark bands and light bands. So a lot of this gets really complicated, and we're not going to get into huge amounts of detail with it. But this is what is providing the banding pattern of an individual muscle cell, and what gives the muscle, skeletal muscle overall, its stripes. This is why it has those striations. Okay, so you've got thin filaments and you've got thick filaments. The thick filaments are composed of a protein called myosin. And each myosin molecule has a tail and these little globular looking heads right here. Okay, so you've got the heads to these two interwoven polypeptide chains, and then you've got smaller polypeptide chains. And so this picture down here is showing a whole bunch of those individual myosin molecules all put together, and a whole bunch of all the different heads, okay? So the thin filaments are composed of the actin. So thick is the myosin, thin is the actin. And the subunits contain active sites for which myosin, those myosin heads, so those globular heads, will attach to this actin during contraction. And then you also need other proteins called tropomyosin and troponin, which are subunits that are bound to the actin. So that's those yellow dots that you see right there. And they're all important in providing the ability to your muscles to contract. So here again, you see the thick filaments, and you got all those globular heads, and you got the blue thin filaments. And what they're going to do is they're going to slide past each other as the muscle contracts. Okay, and this is what's called a sliding filament. So in a relaxed state, the thin filaments and the thick filaments only slightly overlap. But when they're stimulated, the myosin heads bind to the actin and begin sliding. And what is needed to do this is a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. And we'll watch a video of this as well. Okay, so you kind of see the order in which this goes. So you've got myosin, here those globular heads. It reaches up with the help of ATP, and it's attaching to that thin filament. And then in the second step, the myosin head pivots and begins to bend and starts sliding past the thin filament. And then ATP kicks in and attaches the myosin head. And as ATP is split, it returns back to the way it was. And it continues this pattern over and over again. And like I said, I will post also a video of this so you can see this in action and get a better idea of what I'm talking about.